Thank you. As I mentioned this morning in my opening remarks, this 2.5 year amazing project on affordable housing technologies and sustainable innovation communities culminates today in being incorporated into a much bigger GUD project, global initiative on sustainable innovation zones. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, keeping in mind that sustainable innovation zones is part of an even bigger project that relates to GUD's whole mission of using this kind of economic development framework that we call metropolitan economic strategy, sustainable innovation, and inclusive prosperity in order to achieve our main goal, which is to help enable all people everywhere in the world to live and to thrive in peace with each other and in peace with nature. So I'm going to talk about this incredible initiative we've been doing for the past decade, starting in Porto Alegre, Brazil, on sustainable innovation zones, and now we've spread it to a number of other places. This was the first, been operating for 7 years now. You can see the map of the zone. It grew out of the a huge World Bank funded leapfrog economic strategy that GUD did for the state of Rio Grande do Sul to become the most sustainable and innovative place in Latin America by 2030, with sustainable innovation zone being a key part of that strategy. And then you can see, I'll talk more about some of the key elements of sustainable innovation zones and a couple of our key initiatives. We're very proud that just this month, the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine are publishing a new report called Operationalizing Sustainable Development to Benefit People on the Planet, which was led by a distinguished international group of experts. And one of the chapters, the one on urbanization, sustainable cities, there are two case studies, one from the global north of Copenhagen, Denmark, and the other from the global south, from Porto Alegre, Brazil, and it's all about ZISPOA, that the academies now recognizing as a major international best practice and success story that should be spread to cities around the world. So we're proud of that, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. So as I mentioned, GUD, and I'll talk more about this, how metropolitan economic strategy grew over decades and even came out of the Clinton administration. But from the time that we started in 2001, we've been using this framework, focusing on cities and urban regions as the dynamic engines of economic growth in the 21st century through this approach of investing in the fundamental assets and growing the dynamic industry networks. And it's been, driven by these three key things: innovation, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And inclusiveness is a very big part. In fact, we had a huge project. Not only did we do metropolitan economic strategy all over the world with international agencies in many countries, but we had a special initiative on poverty reduction through inclusive economic development based on treating people and communities as assets. We called that the Community Productivity Project. But one key aspect is the sustainable innovation part of this. As we say, getting richer by becoming greener. And that's a really important part about the Sustainable Innovation Zones initiative. Is first and foremost an economic development strategy to grow businesses, jobs, and incomes, and one that's participatory and inclusive in terms of the active community engagement in the process. So you can see here in this first paragraph, that's what we talk about. These are economic development strategies, but they are ones that, in our view, the best way to increase jobs, incomes, productivity, and competitiveness. So in addition to generating inclusive prosperity, you get the bonus that these strategies are the most cost-effective method of promoting renewable energy, and clean technologies, protecting the environment and preventing harmful impacts from climate change. The model is based on, and by the way, you can see the logo, how, in the mindset of the world, economic development goes in one direction, sustainable in the other, and we put them together, going in the same direction and meeting in the middle of the diamond with sustainable economic development, based on the 4 greens. So first off, through the resource efficiency, sustainability doesn't cost you a lot of money, it saves you a lot of money. You're conserving and reusing renewable resources, recycling, reducing waste, all of that reuse, that saves trillions of dollars for people, businesses, organizations, governments everywhere. And the beautiful thing about it is that in order to achieve all that saving, it kind of pays for itself in financing the exponential growth of green opportunities, of new businesses and jobs in order to provide all of the goods and services in demand to achieve that and benefit from that savings. And how does that happen? Through green talent, by investing in people and the skills of tomorrow and the employment opportunities of tomorrow. And lastly, and this is where sustainable innovation zones come in, all of this happens in green places, in places where people live and work and play. That's where the transformation takes place and then scaled up throughout the world. So that's what sustainable innovation zones are about. I wanted to use this opportunity to pay tribute to 2 GUD leaders, 2 vice chairs, both of whom played a vital role in creating all of this that we're so grateful for, and both of whom passed away over the last decade. So we're talking about Sir Peter Hall of London, UK, and Jaime Lerner from Curitiba, Brazil. So first, Peter Hall, I want to commend you. This article that Erica Schoenberger and I wrote after he passed, was published in 2015, really showing how Peter Hall was central to the development of these ideas, going all the way back to University of California at Berkeley in the early 80s, and that and a remarkable group of professors and graduate students working together there helped create the foundation for what later became GUD that Peter Hall co-founded. So there were 2 things in particular I wanted to highlight. First, I coordinated from an economic development strategy for the city of Berkeley that was, we believe, the world's first sustainable economic development strategy. It was also very equitable and inclusive. But one key piece of it was for Berkeley to become a world center in energy conservation and efficiency and in renewable energy. You could see we came very close to actually developing the world's first alternative energy research and industrial park. That didn't quite happen, but Berkeley did succeed in becoming a world leader on clean energy, both the city and the university and the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. The other initiative, I served as deputy director for what was called and Peter Hall, by the way, was a key advisor on the Berkeley plan. The other initiative, I served as deputy director of the California Commission on Industrial Innovation in the early 80s to promote the growth of high technology in California. Steve Jobs was a co-chair of it. And Peter Hall did one of our first studies on the California computer software industry. And even though the main focus was on computer hardware and software, information technology, telecommunications, digital technology, even biotechnology, a key aspect of it was on sustainable innovation and clean technology, or some people now call it climate technology, in promoting the growth of solar photovoltaic cells, which was a new technology back then, made it out of the same thing as silicon chips. Modern wind turbines that are now all over the world were being developed then. The beginnings work on electric vehicles, which ultimately became Tesla, and many other things. But most importantly, there were huge technological breakthroughs on energy efficiency of a whole range of on buildings, on motor vehicles, on a whole range of machines and appliances and electronic devices. So the whole idea is you could get more output from fewer input. And those were big technological breakthroughs that had an enormous impact on California, which through the energy efficiency primarily, by this point, from the mid 1970s to now, people have saved over $100 billion, which was really strengthened their incomes and the overall economy, and reduced emissions and made California a place that got richer by becoming greener. Then Jaime Lerner, another esteemed GOD vice chair, passed away in 2020. Here's Nancy and I visiting with him in Curitiba in 2017. He was an amazing man. He was an architect, an urban planner, and a true visionary with a practical view of life, who literally invented bus rapid transit, which is one of the big sustainable mobility innovations of our lifetime. Started in Curitiba in the 1970s and spread all over the world. And he did many, many other things as three-term mayor of Curitiba and two-term governor of Paraná to make the city well known for being sustainable. Now, what people don't know, and this is important for this talk, is that Curitiba becoming sustainable under Jaime Lerner's leadership and his team was an economic development strategy, a sustainable economic development strategy, because it also that's how they attracted Volvo to build the articulated buses for the BRT system. Now Volvo makes electric buses, Curitiba. And it was a way, by promoting the quality of life of the place through sustainability, to attract talented people and businesses to invest there and grow there. And we learned a lot from him about that. In 2011, in 2009 and 10, GOD began working with something called the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas. It was an initiative of President Obama, President Lula, and many other leaders of countries in the Americas from Canada to Argentina. And they asked us to coordinate what was the first ever international conference on sustainable economic development that we held in Curitiba, that Jaime Lerner helped host and gave the keynote speech, and where we featured a lot of cutting edge work that GOD was doing in the US, as well as what was being done in Curitiba and many other places. This, as I mentioned earlier, this initiative was really pioneered in the Clinton administration, where I was a senior official at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, a national policy initiative that we called Metropolitan Economic Strategy, based on this framework. And we applied it in various ways in many regions, including in Baltimore, Maryland. And one of the most powerful applications was from 1997 to 1999. I coordinated the Strategic Economic Development Plan for Washington, D.C., which was a amazingly successful plan. It turned around. The city was kind of in economic decline at that point, and turned things around over a couple of years, and it's been growing ever since. In fact, the city's still following that plan. And there was one piece of it in particular that I want to highlight, because it became so influential for the future of sustainable innovation zones. And that was the NOMA initiative, north of Massachusetts Avenue, which actually won multiple awards, including was recognized by UN Habitat as one of the 40 best practices in the world, and recognized by the OECD as one of the 10 best practices in the world. And in NOMA, we took this well-located area, but near the center of the city, but it was basically a rail yard area behind Union Station. So it was a lot of vacant land and abandoned old industrial warehouse buildings. And through transit-oriented development, it became, you could see all the features that we highlighted and focused on. It became both the greenest, area of the city and region and the fastest growing area of the city and region. For example, all the new buildings were green, LEED certified buildings, which you didn't see anywhere else. But and then, as I mentioned, transit-oriented development included building a whole new metro station on an existing line, which was quite an engineering feat over 4 years, through a three-way public-private partnership where the private sector actually paid a big chunk of building the station, and became just an incredible catalyst for green-oriented, sustainable-oriented economic development. Here's kind of what NOMA looked like when we started in 1997. Here's a 7-year, by 2014, you can see both the new development on the right-hand side on both sides of the street. Those were LEED certified green office buildings, apartment buildings, mixed use, retail, and so forth. And then you could see at the end of the street was a renovated old factory that became the world headquarters for Sirius XM satellite radio. So that was one of our big attractions to bringing XM to the site. And we preserved every historic building, was part of the fabric. And then above the hill was a new technology high school that we built for the community. And here was the net result of, you could see how well located one NOMA station, you can see the Capitol from there. That was amazing in terms of the private investment, in terms of the number of jobs, and it's still growing now a quarter century later. So NOMA definitely got richer by becoming greener, but was one thing that was really important about it, I think was even more relevant for Porto Alegre, was it was very participatory and inclusive in a very kind of egalitarian way, where everybody was in it together, from moderate income residents in the African-American neighborhoods that surrounded NOMA, that we included, from the developers and all levels of government and so forth. And with ongoing stakeholder meetings where everybody worked together to meet this impossible challenge of how we could get the financing to do and build the station. And so that's one of the things that was so special and important about its success. At any rate, now I'm going to jump ahead to this period in 2007. As I mentioned, we were already doing metropolitan economic strategy from 2001 through GOD, but in 2007 we made the decision, because of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that came out then, that made it clear that climate change was getting much worse than we expected. Emissions were still going up, and the world had to figure out a way to drastically change them fast. And the best way to do it was to actually grow the economy by making the change, so that people would be better off economically in terms of businesses, jobs, and incomes, and prosperity and quality of life, by making this change to non-fossil energy and circular economy and all of that. So we began working on and helping lead advanced cutting edge efforts in the US, in San Jose and Silicon Valley, in San Antonio, Texas, for the state of Delaware, and metropolitan Portland, Oregon, Washington, in Denver, Colorado, and Southwest Florida. It was very important to show a new higher standard of this approach of sustainable innovation, inclusive prosperity. One of the things that came out of one of the efforts, the one in Portland, was a big initiative called eco districts, which kind of neighborhood sustainable development initiatives, very participatory. And we learned a lot from that. And that also became one of the models for sustainable innovation zones. Eco districts did spread to other cities in the US and Canada since then. It culminated for us in the US at that time in a kind of the biggest effort. It was funded by the US Department of Energy, the only one that they funded, where we did a sustainable economic development strategy for Sarasota County, Florida. that was absolutely based on, getting richer by becoming greener. You can see the list of recommendations, the kind of things that we focused on, including the energy. EEZ is the Energy Economic Zone, which was another kind of earlier version of a sustainable innovation zone. Around this time, I talked about the ECPA conference in Curitiba, so we were more and more internationalizing these efforts. One example I wanted to highlight, in 2009, we worked with the UN leading up to the COP15, the climate conference in Copenhagen that December, on what we called the Global Climate Prosperity Agreement, the $1 trillion deal, which was to get around the impasse of the rich countries and the poor countries arguing over whose responsibility it was and who would pay for it. We said, look, the private sector can do a huge amount of the transformation for profit by investing in renewable energy and clean technologies in the global South, so they can grow their economies sustainably without increasing emissions. And so that we called it the $1 trillion deal, because it would be $100 billion a year investment over 10 years by the private sector voluntarily for profit. And in order to prove that this idea would work, we did a study for Copenhagen called the Global Climate Prosperity Scoreboard. And we looked at, since the beginning of 2007 through the third quarter of 2009, $1.25 trillion had been invested for profit by the private sector in green opportunities in clean tech. And we did that together with Ethical Markets Media, with Hazel Henderson and Tim Nash, and we kept it going under the name of the Green Transition Scoreboard. And so by a decade later, by 2019, that number had reached 10.4 trillion invested, most in the global north, but growing all over. And over the next decade, it's going to grow exponentially faster. And now, through ZISPOA in Porto Alegre, we have this SIP program at the Federal University, and the students are working on the next version of this report that will come out later this year, and we're really excited about that. So now we get to Porto Alegre and Rio Grande do Sul. As I mentioned, we were recruited in 2011, GUD, after the ECPA conference in Curitiba, to do a statewide economic strategy for the state of Rio Grande do Sul. Very big state, more than 11 million people. It's bigger than Sweden. And that was also, it was for the state government with support from the federal government in Brasilia and World Bank funding. Because it's such a big state, we were trying to figure out, how over 15 years could Rio Grande do Sul do what California did over 4 decades, and what would be the catalyst to move it along faster. We came up with this idea of doing sustainable innovation zones in major cities all around the state, especially around universities and tech parks and all of that, and recommending that the first one be in Porto Alegre, the capital city. Sustainable innovation zones combine 6 key elements together. They combine them together. They must have all 6: innovation and technology, entrepreneurship and startups, sustainability and resource efficiency, creativity and collaboration, participatory community management, and a business-friendly environment. And so it's kind of, if you can think of it like, they do have these urban innovation ecosystems, or technology innovation ecosystems, or innovation districts. So this is incorporating all of that, but focusing on sustainability and resource efficiency. So innovation for, fundamentally, primarily for getting greener. And the same with, if you think about community economic development, or community development ecosystems, which are very inclusive. This has that, but again, with this focus on becoming more sustainable. So here's a map of Zespoa. You can see it covers the Port Alegre is 1.5 million. This covers the center of the city, the heart of the city, a big chunk of the waterfront, and there's a train line with multiple stations that runs along the waterfront. And when we in a lot of major institutions, the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, Federal University of Health Sciences of Porto Alegre, major hospitals, some major employers, and so forth. So when we began in 2015, it was the original zone was a small area that was a part of 2 neighborhoods near the university. So now it's expanded to all of 15 neighborhoods. There's 210,000 people who live inside the zone. It's 14% of the city's population. When we started, we thought, well, you know, I talked about the 6 elements and the 4 greens, but we also, for Zespoa, had 5 things we wanted to accomplish. If Rio Grande do Sul was going to be the most sustainable and innovative in Latin America by 2030, we thought, well, Zespoa should be, in 2015, we thought it should be the most sustainable by 2020. Now we've moved that back to 2030. But we are making progress. And here were the 5 things we decided to focus on: solar energy, energy efficiency, what we called renewable technology friendly, which is circular economy, zero waste, what we called bike friendly, which was really sustainable mobility more broadly, and digitally connected. And we've made progress on 3 of them, on solar energy, circular economy, and bike friendly sustainable mobility. So to give an example, on circular economy, one of our first projects was we worked with the city government, the agency that deals with municipal waste and recycling and all that. And they had a facility in Zespoa that was very underutilized, and we made an agreement to take a big part of it and turn it into what we call Espaço Floresta, a community garden and composting center that was really popular and gave birth to 2 startup businesses. One, Reciclo, to compost residential waste, and the other food waste, and the other to Arco, to compost commercial food waste. Another big event we did was this World Environment Day festival in honor of Jose Lutzenberger, who was from Porto Alegre. He was Brazil's first Minister of Environment, most famous environmentalist, co-founded one of the first activist environmental groups in Brazil called Agapan in the early 70s. And interestingly, his father, as an architect, had designed this place called Villa Flores, which was just in the beginning of being renovated by community activists as a big cultural center and collaborative. So Villa Flores grew up together with Zespoa. So we had this World Environment Day Festival there to highlight all the themes. So you can see the solar theme. We worked with a startup called Oz Engineeria, where they built, and we helped to popularize solar trees as a uniting sort of technology and nature. It kind of looked like a tree, but the branches were solar panels. They provided LED lighting and music and videos and all sorts of cool stuff. And then you can see also the bike friendly theme here, and the circular economy thing. We worked with the DMLU to do. There was a price of admission was recycling special items, and we had education about that. The launching of Reciclo, it really electric car sharing. It was the beginning of that, and so forth. Another thing I wanted to highlight was we were very fortunate right at the beginning in 2015 to be selected by the government of Sweden and the Swedish Institute to be their #1 priority for, in 2016, what they called the Global Smart Living Challenge. And we work with them on sustainable mobility in particular for that 1 year. But more importantly, GUD and Zespoa became partners with the Swedish Embassy in Brasilia in helping organize Sweden-Brazil Innovation Week events in Porto Alegre every year. Now, these are done in cities all over Brazil, but the ones in Porto Alegre focus on sustainable urban development, green energy, sustainable mobility, circular economy, zero waste, every year since 2016 because of this great partnership. As in addition to bike sharing, we had a startup called Loop that was a dockless bike sharing, and we promoted bike lanes and all that. But we also were promoting electric car sharing, and we had a group of students from Professor Luis Felipe Nascimento's social environmental management graduate course at Orgus, worked on a project of how we could do electric car sharing. If we could start with just one electric car and one charging station and sign up customers. So this was the beginning of the effort to try and sign up the customers. And the other part of the effort was at a place called Shopping Total inside the zone. We worked with three startups, MVM, Yes, and Orchestra, to build a solar-powered electric car charging station. And this was the launching of this event in October 2016 for Sweden Brazil Innovation Week with a big crowd. The mayor of Porto Alegre, Jose Fortunacci, wearing our T-shirt, and the Per Arne Hellborn, the Swedish ambassador to Brazil. So here we are launching the charging station. We at the time we had an electric car for the day. We weren't able to get one to do the electric car sharing, although later on we helped spawn a startup called Grillo that is doing that in Zespoa. The year later, we did this huge bike-friendly festival where we were able to close a major street for a whole Sunday with the city's cooperation, where we had lots of bike stores and services and biking groups and e-bikes. Volta was another startup, and entertainment and education and incredible amount of activities. And then, which included just a month later, the Swedish ambassador came back with the Swedish Minister of Education, who was also the head of the Green Party, and we did this global climate challenge bike tour. You could this picture, which was on the front page of the paper, was the two of them riding the Loop bikes, which was this bike sharing starter from Zespoa, and right behind them, that you can't see in the picture, was 50 of us riding behind them as we did this tour of Zespoa. I mentioned earlier the solar theme. This is very, very important, become increasingly important. We created in 2017 this group called POA Solar, which we also call Solarizing Zespoa. And there were a number of startups that do rooftop insulation. Yes, Elysia, Solaris, and others that came out of our efforts. And we also worked on EOS, which does remote solar. And we're working on a whole strategy for Zespoa to be the most solarized urban place in Latin America by 2030, and hopefully maybe one of the most solarized in the world. This was an early project. There's Luis Felipe Nascimento with the red shirt next to me, and this was another class where he had this competition for who could come up with the best idea for Zespoa and actually do it. And this one group, that you can see the three students on the right, and the tall guys from Elysia, this solar startup, and the other side is the dean of the management school. And what they came up with was working with Elysia, was a whole new product that didn't exist before, called the solar post. So in the courtyard of the management school, there's a big pole. At eye level are all these USB ports, and at the top is one solar panel and a battery, and enabled people to hang out and charge their smartphones and tablets and other things from solar energy. It was the first solar panel in the entire university. It's a very big university. Soon we hope there will be many more. Mentioning these courses that Luis Felipe was doing was important because it turned out he started a trend. And then this was one of our greatest resources. There were many professors that formed a group called ZisProf to support Zespoa and now really lead Zespoa, that then offered many courses that was part of the regular curriculum courses they were already teaching, but enabling the students in the courses to do research and even sometimes action on ZSPOA related projects that fit the theme of what they were studying in the course. So they got to learn a lot, and they got to apply it in some kind of practical way, and they loved it. All the students loved it. So we got tons of people participating in ZSPOA because of that, through the classes directly, and then later on because they stayed interested. And it built this great network of professors, not only at URGS, but at UXBA and a number of other universities throughout the city. One thing that grew out of those efforts was, this was something we worked on for 4 years, the Sustainable Innovation Professional, the SIP program. And that's now happening at URGS. We're just kind of completing the first course that began in August, and then it'll start up again. And the second semester will be in this coming March. And there are 16 students, all master's and PhD students in a variety of fields, although I think mostly from engineering and from management, that are going to get, in addition to their degree, this certificate that they're a sustainable innovation professional from having done these special 2-core sequence, taking some other courses related to sustainable innovation that in their field, and doing this capstone project on ZSPOA. So we are hoping that this will have a big impact, not only in Porto Alegre, but universities all over the world can adopt a version of the SIP program as part of sustainable innovation zones. Since today is a UN Habitat Urban Thinkers Campus, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the vital role of UN Habitat World Urban Campaign, Urban Thinkers Campuses, in doing ZSPOA. The first one we did in 2017. It was a huge event, more than 200 people, more than 75 speakers, and it was immensely collaborative, and it kind of set a standard for bringing together organizations and activities and activists, professionals, entrepreneurs from all across Porto Alegre to work together to advance ZSPOA. And that became an inspiration for a couple of other collaborative partnerships in Porto Alegre, a big one called Pecto Alegre, and another one called Po Inquieta. Then 2 years later, we did a second Urban Thinkers Campus that highlighted not only ZSPOA, but other sustainable innovation zones that existed by that point. Again, very participatory and inclusive. And this one had an action component, which is that the bike-friendly group of ZSPOA had developed a project that we called the Sustainable Parklet and Paracicla, which is the Portuguese word for bike parking. So basically takes out 3 parking spaces. We had to work with the city government to do it. Working with cafe owners, and we got some help from the Swedish embassy and from Tetra Pak, a Swedish company. And the net of it is we work with a group called Solidaridade, which grew out of a project at URGS Engineering School. They developed eco blocks from recycled concrete, so the recycled concrete blocks, in order to create livelihoods for low-income families. So this parklet was built out of the eco blocks. See, it also has a green roof. It has the solar post, so you can sit there while you're sipping cafezinho and charge your phone. So that was the second solar post in Porto Alegre, and it's got secure bike parking on a dedicated bike lane. So at the Urban Thinkers Campus, we opened the parklet. You can see 2 of the local sponsors, cafes, Josephinas and Sip Salabim. And it was going to be the beginning of many, but then COVID kind of got in the way of that. But you can see that one of the things I love about it is we got permission from the city to put this big sign, kind of like a street sign, and it says, "Você está na Zona de Inovação Sustentável de Porto Alegre." You are in ZSPOA, you're in the zone. As I mentioned, one of the things that was important about this, I wrote about for World Campaign, is it wasn't just highlighting Despoa, but other sustainable innovation zones that had come along modeled on Despoa. So in 2018, we got in another city, a smaller city in Rio Grande do Sul, Santo Angelo, we got a second sustainable innovation zone. This was actually led by the newly elected mayor, and you can see Helenice Reese there, who's the coordinator on behalf of the city government. But they really followed our model, and it's doing very well. Jason. The same year in Panama City, Panama, we got ACTA was launched, and which was really heartening because it showed, even though they were GOD people who I knew, the team that organized ACTA, we weren't there. We were just communicating with them long distance by email and WhatsApp and so forth. And so that was heartening to see that we could help spread this idea that way. Then the next year in 2019 in Western Sydney, Australia, at the university, where they're building a new mixed use community, residential and commercial near the campus. And the developer that's doing that, they're sort of following a different version of our model, a brand new community that called the Sustainable Innovation Community. Then we were working on three more in Brooklyn with Brooklyn College, in Toronto with University of Toronto, in London with University College London. But then all those got put on hold because of COVID and haven't been revived. But then in 2022, this year, we started again, and we got our first one in the US in Wheaton in Montgomery County, Maryland, just outside of Washington, DC. You can see the partners, the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, which is part of the Montgomery County government, is funding this and help put it all together. So it's an economic development initiative based on sustainable innovation, inclusive prosperity. Two major nonprofit groups, one Montgomery Green, that's an activist and business and professional group in Wheaton, where there's a lot of Black and Latino, and it's a very international population in Wheaton. And Bethesda Green, which promotes sustainable entrepreneurship, and certifies green businesses, does B Corp training. And so that you can see they're explicitly following our model, the four greens. And this, the Wheaton State Innovation Zone already received major funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, being awarded an Inclusive Energy Innovation Prize. So it's happening, and it's very exciting. We hope that Wheaton will be a model to spread many places. The other one that's also started this year is in Poland, in Poznan, which is a big university town in the central west part of Poland. The Poznan Sustainable Innovation, they call it EDIT Poznan, where the EDIT stands for, that's an acronym from Polish about innovation and technology. And it's led by a group of professors primarily from the School of Architecture at the Poznan University of Technology, which is kind of the MIT of Poland, and then also a much bigger university called Adam Mickiewicz University. So we're spreading, we're growing, and that's what this project's all about. We hope all of you will want to get involved and help enable it to happen.